Hello, and welcome to another video. One thing the Chinese do particularly well is crispy pork belly. This is one of my favorite dishes of Chinese food from when I lived in Indonesia. And while it's a little complicated to do at home, it's quite doable. Just plan ahead, give yourself a day worth of time, and you'll be able to enjoy the crispy, luscious pork belly that maybe you didn't even know to order in restaurants. Before I begin though, I have to say somebody at work gave this to me. Thanks so much. This is, I work at Adjust. This is the Adjust logo, name of the YouTube channel here. And I was doing another project for folks at work called Culinary Creations, which are a set of live feeds over Zoom. Thank you so much. Great. I really appreciate this. And sort of as a thank you to this, I'll be putting a link to our job boards in at the bottom of the recipe. We're still hiring even during this pandemic, maybe not as fast as we would otherwise, but it's still going on. But back to the cooking. This is definitely one dish to keep in mind. So let's go on to the ingredients. So the ingredients. First we have the pork belly, and the really important part here is that we still have the skin on. If you can't get pork belly with the skin, don't even bother trying this dish. It's super important. We're going to go ahead and add vinegar to the skin, rub the rest of it with a medium dry sherry. The 5-spice goes on the bottom and sides. After it dries for a while, I'll add some sesame oil on the skin. And then this really coarse salt here is for baking. Delicious dish. We'll go over how to make it again. Fair bit of effort starts now. So now the big secret to a really nice crispy pork belly are lots and lots of little tiny holes on the skin. You don't want to poke too deep. You don't want to poke into the meat. You just want to poke deep enough that the fat can escape. So what I've done is I've taken a bunch of bamboo skewers, and basically I'm going to very slowly poke holes all over the skin. This is the most labor-intensive part of making this dish. You can use a fork, but it's a lot more work. So that's just this part here. I'm going to repeat that all the way around the rest of this, and then I will come back. But I mean, just as a note, usually what I do is I work all the way around the outside. And now that these are getting dull, I'm going to have to replace them. And I will keep going through the whole rest of this until it's all poked. So now I've perforated the skin all across here. I'm going to take my vinegar, and here I have 10%, but you can use 5%. And I'm just going to put a little bit on my hand, and I'm going to rub it all over the skin. And the purpose of this is to ensure that the acids from the vinegar get into the skin and soften it up a bit. So there we go. And I'm going to do the same thing, but with sherry on the whole rest of it. So and so here we have nicely rubbed in sherry. And now I'm going to take this 5-spice. I'm going to sprinkle it over all of it but the skin. Doesn't need to be a huge amount. And then from here, I'm going to let this sit uncovered in the refrigerator overnight. As I do so, the skin is going to dry out and it's going to become a bit more pinkish. Then I'll rub it with sesame oil. I'm going to bake it under a thick layer of salt. And then I'm going to take the salt off. I'm going to broil it so that this ends up just nice and crispy. When I end up with this, it's going to be juicy and flavorful through this entire roast. But the top is going to be puffy and crispy. So I'm looking forward to this. Into the refrigerator for a night. Probably we'll come back to this in about 24 hours. 24 hours is fine. Welcome back. It's been about a day. You can see I have a different shirt. And so I'm going to go ahead and start to prepare this. I'm not going to wear the apron yet. I will once I start cooking the accompaniments and when I go ahead and after I have this in the oven. So this has been in the refrigerator now for a day. You can see the skin is starting to get really dry. The outside here is starting to dry off a little bit. If I smell it, I can smell the 5-spice, but I haven't put anything on the top yet. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And then we'll see how to do the first stage of the baking. So, step 1, sesame oil. Just gonna pour a little bit on, rub it around. See, you can do this the day before, but if you want a nice crispy skin, it's much better to let the skin dry out before applying oil to it. So, I'm gonna go ahead and rub this in. And then this will help provide even more flavor to this wonderful dish. Step 2, aluminum foil. Now this is actually a little tricky for a couple reasons, but basically we want this to be nice and tight. As this cooks, it's going to contract this way and scoot up, which is fine. But this is going to pose us a few interesting challenges with cooking. So I try to make sure that this is kind of semi in the right place. I'm going to fold this down to get kind of something I can work with. And then I'm going to fold the corners in. It's very common to have these pork belly pieces so they aren't really rectangular. And in those cases, you sometimes you're just going to have to deal with the fact that getting a nice snug mold around this isn't going to be perfectly possible. Again, as this cooks, this is going to become less snug anyway, and that's going to just mean that some salt's going to fall out of this. Step 3 is to cover it in salt. Now a lot of people are like, wow, that's a lot of salt. You're going to kill me with sodium. But as you'll see later, almost all this salt gets removed. And actually, the fact that I just rubbed it with sesame oil means there's a lot less salt that's going to get absorbed by the skin. So I have this layer of salt over the top, and what's going to happen as this cooks is that the salt's going to absorb the water and the liquid that comes out of the skin, and it's going to help the skin dry out even more. So the salt here is there to dry this out. It's not there to make it salty. When we get done, we'll scrape the salt off and we'll put it back in the oven. So here we are. This is then going to go in at 200 Celsius, 450 for 45 minutes or an hour, and then we'll be back. And here you can see this has shrunk a bit. You can see the salt crust comes out over the top on the sides. What's happened is that this has shrunk, but it's also expanded vertically. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to scrape the salt off. I'm going to put it back on this rack here without the salt. And then from there, we will do the final roasting. So the simplest thing to do is to take a spatula and just scrape it like that. And then you pick it up. It's hot, that's okay. And then we can remove this and dump the salt . Place it back in the center. And now what we're going to do is we are going to roast this about as far down vertically as we can in the oven. And we're going to change it. We're going to change the oven settings. I'm going to talk about that here. So in a standard American oven, your next step would be your next step is going to be a broil, okay? A broil is where basically you're putting this underneath an inverted grill, and you're going to get heat coming down from the top, and that's going to make the skin bubble up. In a European oven, however, oftentimes you don't want to run the grill with the door open. So what you're going to do instead is you're going to run the circulating air grill, and that's what I'm going to do here. So if you are watching this from the US, you'll put this back in the lowest rack on the oven, and then you'll go ahead and turn the broiler on. In a European oven, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to, again, 200, but I'm letting the oven air out now to get a little bit cooler. And then I'm going to turn it on to circulated air grilling. This will show a broil mark with a fan. And that's going to blow really hot air over this. And that's the closest thing we have to the traditional charcoal grilling method. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to put it back in. And we'll be back again in about 20 minutes. And this will be ready to serve. Or rather, it'll be ready to sit while we wait for it to get ready to serve. So it wasn't 20 minutes, it was 22 minutes. You can tell this is going to be really crispy. I'm going to start that again. So it wasn't 20 minutes, it was 22 minutes. You can tell this is going to be super crispy. You can actually bring it out when it's only like 70 to 80% puffed up like this. I think that's about 80%, so that's okay. And I managed to burn myself on the pan. That's okay. The next really critical stage is that we're going to set this aside for 10 or maybe 20, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes. Let it rest, cool down a little bit, and so forth. If I try to cut it right now, what's going to happen is that all the liquid inside the pork is just going to run all over the cutting board, and that's going to have two major unfortunate implications. The first thing is it's going to make the meat a lot more dry. And that's not ideal, but this is a pretty moist cut, so that's not the end of the world. The much worse problem is that this skin will end up sitting in the juices and soften up. But we really want this skin to be nice and crispy, right? So we're going to go ahead and let this rest so that we can get that nice crispy skin. So you're going to have to live with the changes of shadows. We're now into the evening, and so the light's a little different. So to cut this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the ribs off. And you're going to see what I mean about water pouring, liquid pouring out. So I'm going to do this way on the side of the board. And you can see a little bit of juice there. Not nearly as much as there would be if I hadn't let this sit. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a slice here, and I'm going to put that on a plate. Then I'm going to serve it with the kankung, which you'll see how to cook in another video, along with rice. And I think that'll be the main pairings for today. So, okay, this is pretty good for a portion. You can hear that nicely crunch. So I'm going to put these on the side. I'm going to serve with some rice. So just to arrange it nicely, I'm going to put the crispy pieces all facing towards the edge of the plate. Put a portion of rice. And then a portion of kankung. And here we have it. Crispy pork belly served with kankung and rice. Now, in Chinese restaurants, oftentimes you'll see it served with an orange sauce. We could also serve it with a chili sauce. There are a bunch of different things we can do. But for now, I'm just going to serve it plain like this because the flavors all go very nicely together. And so I actually kind of like it this way. And now for the taste test. See this nice crispy skin on the top. See the layers of fat underneath, the meat underneath that. This should be really pretty good. So the first thing you notice is that when you eat the meat, the five spice flavor really kind of diffuses nicely into it. So next I'm going to try the fat and the skin. Perfect crunchy skin. Delicious. The fat just kind of adds to it. The meat is just totally delicious. Wish you the best of luck when making this. Bon appetit.